America's beverage companies are investing in America. We're American companies, making American products with American workers in America's hometowns. We're local bottlers and manufacturers, operating in all 50 states, employing more than 275,000 Americans in good-paying jobs, delivering for the nation, because we believe in the promise of America and the people who make it great. Learn more at WeDeliverForAmerica.org. Paid for by the American Beverage Association.
Police responded to a 911 call.
Dramatic video of gun insanity in the Bronx.
Police releasing a new video of a person that they are still trying to track down.
Defund the police is not the answer.
Many people surveyed said they just don't feel safe in the city.
It's a shooting outside of a store.
This is Bo Dietl's One Tough Podcast.
Police this morning are searching for the person who turned this Harlem platform to a crime scene.
A Red Apple Media Podcast Network production. Now, here's Bo Dietl.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bo Dietl's One Tough Podcast. Today, we got a great episode with a very special guest. Joining us is Lieutenant Commander Vernon Geberth. He's a legend in law enforcement. Lieutenant Commander Vernon Geberth, the cop who wrote the book on murder. In Vernon's new book, The Godfather of Homicide, revised and enhanced by Vincent Cardillo, we dive deep into his legendary career. From his early days in the NYPD, from the tactical patrol force to running homicide and becoming an international renowned expert on homicide and death investigation. It covers everything. His war stories, his toughest cases, his shootouts, the politics in the police department that I know all about, and even the battles that almost ended his career. This is a guy that literally wrote the book on practical homicide investigation. And now, for the first time, we get the full story of how he shaped modern homicide investigations worldwide. This is a must-read for you, and it has really everything for anyone who wants to become a detective to know of the pitfalls that you're facing and what the battles are from within the police department. Vernon, welcome to Bo Dietl's One Tough Podcast. Let's get started.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bo.
So there's a little something here that I'd like to read, and I'm holding your book up. And what I do is I recommend everybody who's a detective, who wants to be a detective, who's interested in becoming a detective. I showed your book to my president of my company, Mike Ruggiero, today. And I said, Mike, read it. Now, the difference is things have changed since this book because our careers kind of parallel the time element together. And
we were contemporaries.
And let me read it. Lieutenant Commander Vernon Geberth is the author of the famous textbook, Practical Homicide Investigation. And now it's in its 5th edition. He's also the author of the sex-related homicide and death investigation. Vernon's a world-renowned homicide expert, and many active retired detectives, like I just said, and investigators have used this textbook. This legacy book describes Vernon's legendary career. And let's go right at it. Like I said, today I showed it to my president of my company, Mike Ruggiero, former detective sergeant with the New York City Police Department, and I said, you got to read it. So your book kind of mimics my career because it was around the same time. And the pitfalls that people don't understand really are magnified in the book with the jealousy, with the chiefs. God knows. Yeah. Jimmy Sullivan was the chief of detectives when my partner, Tom Colleran, and I broke the nun rape case in East Harlem.
Yeah, that was a famous case.
And when they carved the 27 crosses on it, and we were anti-crime cops, and he was an anti-crime detective, Tommy. We went on our own. We weren't part of the task force, and we suffered a lot. Because reading your book, man, I saw it with you and the chiefs. I love when you called the chief Beetle Bailey. You sure? What was that chief's name? Because I remember in those SOD we had that.
Well, we don't want to name him. I made him a different name in the book.
Oh, well, I know exactly who you're talking about. He was the chief in SOD, and when we had the he said, because I was in the original citywide anti-crime. So as I said, we mirror. So let's start your career. So you start your career, and I remember the World's Fair, and I never realized they had a World's Fair police department. I never knew that.
Well, the World's Fair Police Department was a microcosm of the NYPD because all the retired bosses and people taking terminal leave were the bosses in the World's Fair working through the Pinkerton Corporation.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, because everything was the same as the NYPD. Instead of UF 49, it was WF 49. So everything was a WF.
Oh, it was like a copycat. So this is before. Now, you had taken the test. When did you take the test to become a cop?
I had taken a test 3 years earlier, and I didn't tell anybody in my family because they didn't want to know that. Only me and my girlfriend knew. And she worked in the city. She'd pick up the chief. So we were kind of monitoring when these classes were coming in. I was in my third year of college, and I own a college, and I was taking business. They didn't have criminal justice in those days. And the brother who was in charge of career advancement, he calls me into his office and says to him, what company are you going to work with this summer? I already have my assignment, brother. He goes, what's that? I goes, NYPD. He goes, what? You're becoming a what? You're becoming a cop? You went to Iona College? I says, hey, brother, you see that collar you got around your neck? That's your vocation? Well, the NYPD is my vocation.
So then we fast forward, then all of a sudden you get called in, you get into the academy. Now, there was some one thing in this. When I came on, I thought TPF, you had to be 6 foot tall. When I came on, you had to be 5'8". I had to sleep on the friggin' floor to pass. My brother Alan, God rest his soul, wanted to be a cop, but he was 5'7". Today, he would be a big cop. And
Today, it doesn't matter.
And he never would have got on. How did you get so now you go into the academy, and I read about you with the life-saving there, and you were a cop's cop. You were aggressive, kind of similar to my career, but the only difference was you went to college and you got smarter and you got those big words coming out of your mouth and you really got a great education, and I admire that so much. My whole thing was, everybody said, the only time I went to college was John Jay College. I don't want to repeat what I said about it, but I was the only guy in the classroom. I think it was 1970. It was during open enrollment. I was the only white guy in the classroom, and everybody had these big afros on, and they calling me the cop, the racist cop, and all that. And I got a B average. I never gave a term paper, so that's how I kind of look at John Jay College. If Bo could get a B average not being there, I'm not that impressed with John Jay College, put it that way.
No,
maybe it's changed. Maybe it's changed. Maybe it's changed. But so now you go into the academy, and part of the thing was, I knew you were a good swimmer, obviously. There was
I was a lifeguard. That was the whole story. And then when the instructor, my three antagonists were pissed off at me because I asked about the term paper, and they started, what's wrong with you? You told the instructor. I said, hey, it's part of the curriculum. Don't be a jerk. So we went for water safety training, and I never saw a black guy swim like that before. I was a lifeguard. I was pulling them out of the water all the time. I says, geez, this guy's like an Olympic swimmer. So he comes across the pool. He goes, all right, we're going to do life saving. I need a volunteer. So the three wise guys volunteered me.
Well, we had two black guys in my academy class. None of them could swim. But, that was something, I don't want to make a racist joke, but there ain't that many black swimmers, let's be honest. There's about as much.
No, it wasn't. And I was a lifeguard. I knew that. So he tells me, jump in the deep end. I'm going to make you a victim. And when I take you underwater, if you feel like you're in trouble, tap me 3 times. So when he grabbed me by the back, I tucked my chin and went into lifeguard mode, took him to the bottom of the pool. Next thing, he's tapping me like crazy to get out. We come to the top. He goes, where'd you learn that? I was a lifeguard, sir. He goes, good, you're my assistant. I said, those three MFs that volunteered me, they're next. I'm going to make sure they got a mouthful of water.
There's one thing I had in the academy, the physical training and all that. When I was in high school, we had the Marine Corps physical fitness team. I think you had it in 1963 when Kennedy got whacked. That's when it was with pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, squat thrusts, and running. You had a 5-man team that competed against every high school in America. We were number one in the nation 2 years in a row. I was number one individual in the country where we would do the push-ups, sit-ups, squat thrusts, run, and all that. So when I went to the academy, Mr. Clean was there, Sullivan.
Mr. Clean, yeah, he was there.
And the karate guy there, Gato, or what was his name, the karate guy?
I know who you're talking about. The short little guy, but he was so dangerous, they wouldn't put him on the street.
Yeah, and they would put bets on me. I was doing 40 pull-ups and 170 push-ups, so they were giving bets back and forth. So I was in very good physical strength that carried me through my whole career without killing anybody in my whole career, because I always used my physical strength. And so now let's talk about you. It ain't about Bo. It's about you now going in there. How do you get into TPF? Originally, like I said, I thought it was 6 foot you had to be.
You had to be 6 foot, but I was college. I was ace in all the exams. I put a request in for it. and they were looking for people like me for TPF. But it's funny, you're right, because when I came into the street, my partner was 6'3". They called us the Mutt and Jeff team. I was the midget, but I made up for that height in what I did. I had a super arrest record in TPF. I mean, I was just sailing through. But the beauty of being a tactical patrol force cop is one of the only legitimate units in the NYPD where if you worked hard, you got promoted. I never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, but
merit right.
But then all of a sudden, you faced what I faced when I first came out of the academy. I went out. We were in the 110 precinct. I got all the guys that were in the academy class. We had the big walkie-talkies. We went after all the drug dealers on Elmhurst Avenue, all the Colombian drug dealers, taking guns and all that. So we got back to the precinct, and in this muster room in the back there, all of a sudden you would have your name there with arrests. And the guys would make one arrest a month or something like that. All of a sudden we were making 5 and 6 a day, and the line would go right up there with all the arrests. And a couple of the old timers, just like you had, hey kid, you're starting to embarrass her. What are you doing? What are you trying to be here? You're supposed to make no more than one arrest. I said, you do what you want. And I'll never forget, I get in a radio car, and the next thing is he goes, you don't touch the phone. I said, let me explain something to you. Look at the roll call. You got 4 hours. And these are all times, like you used the word hairbag, and that's exactly the expression. I said, do me a favor, okay? You got your 4 hours. I got it. If you don't like it, go ride with somebody else. My 4 hours, it says I'm a recorder. That's when I'm a recorder. And then you drive, okay? And I was not afraid of anybody. I was not afraid to give my opinion either. I wanted to be a cop, and that was it. So I was only in uniform short period. And then we had the Black Liberation Army was killing little cops. I think we had 11 killed one year and 13 another year. And then they had us following, and this was the advent of anti-crime, following the radio cars with an unmarked car to see if they were going to ambush.
I remember that.
So now
I was in a task force because in Manhattan North we had the attempted murder of Curry and Benetti in the 2-6. 2 days later, Pigeontini and Jones. I was right into that. And then I got to tell you, those stupid gals at Columbia University, the bad girls, they wanted to be with the radicals. Yeah. They were giving safe haven to these guys. Mm-hmm. And we were coming in and we were raiding the apartment. Next thing you know, we're getting civilian complaints because you're raiding college students' apartments. And these ain't college students, they're radicals.
And then, you know, in reading your book, you go into Taxi Truck, because Taxi Truck was the advent of citywide anti-crime, which I went into citywide anti-crime. And that's when I volunteered to be a Schmeckel decoy and all that crap. Yeah.
I love that unit. But before I got to there, I was in Bronx Narcotics, okay? I had a great career in Bronx Narcotics. Had a couple shootings, met commendations, made the only bribery arrest, didn't know that at the time. This drug dealer from Manhattan, the Bronx, $1,000. People offer this money all the time, but they're drunk, drug addicts. They're stupid. This guy was corrupting the system. Little did I know that me and my dopey partner made the only narcotics arrest in 1969 in the narcotics division.
Yeah, because they're all taking money.
Yeah, now I'm down in SIC, SIU, yes.
IAD. IAD, you mean?
It was a state investigation commission. It was even scarier. They want to know how come. I said, because the guy's a drug dealer. That's why. Well, how come other people offer you money? You don't, because they're sick. Okay, this guy tried to pervert the system. Anyway, to make a long story short, that same year I got hit with a heavy-duty civilian complaint in which this Latino politician and a Black Panther witness was against me and my partner. And we had to go down to CCRB, and this captain was a real bastard. He wanted a pound of flesh. And he questioned us privately, separately, then together. And then he said to me, listen, kid, you could save your job. Tell me the truth. I started laughing. I said, that's what I do to criminals, Captain. He went ballistic.
But, you know, people listening out there, they didn't understand what exactly went on. You were fighting two things. You were fighting the criminals, then you were fighting the bureaucracy of the police department. And when you went out of line, when you did too much like what you did, I mean, some of your cases, phenomenal cases there. It was so entertaining reading about them. And we could sit here for a week to go through that book on all the cases, but obviously there was some highlights. But then you go into Taxi Truck, you started then let's do a little chronological thing. After that, what happens?
Well, after the civilian complaint, he went to the grand jury, tried to indict me. And so the district attorney that had the case, he knew who I was. He said, are you willing to talk to me without a lawyer? I said, absolutely. I didn't do anything wrong. So he interviews me. I give him the, right? Next thing you know, we go before the grand jury. This captain's trying to get me indicted. They come up, no true bill. It was a very nerve-wracking experience, Bo, because my life was on the line. Okay, no true bill. I didn't get back to Bronx Narcotics when the captain sent up a telephone message. He dumped me to Harlem, an out-of-borough transfer to punish me. And that's how I ended up.
Reading, you had the Bribery Review Board. And the Bribery Review Board was the name of the group there?
No, that was later on.
Oh, but that was something I dealt with, because I was number one in overtime in 1976 and 77, front page of the New York Post. Yeah,
that's when they had that.
I was making 160 felonies every year. Grinwald was an inspector. He said, well, if you don't want Bo to make an arrest, give him the day off. He went through every one of my cases. They had me driving a sergeant around. I would jump out of the car, take a guy down with a gun, bring it back to the station house, and the sergeant would say, Bo, you're going to get me fired. Then they had me on the TS answering the phone in the precinct. I'd go to the bodega for a sandwich. Boom, I'd come back with a guy in handcuffs. He had a gun on him. You know, I was very active, put it that way. And I was the thorn in the side, and they were trying to get me all the time. I was brought before a few grand juries also, and you want to know something? It's not a fun thing, but
no, it's not a fun thing, because you could get indicted, you can go to jail, and you're the good guy.
Yeah, and the only thing that saved me, one in Manhattan I'll never forget, was some woman said, we got grabbing guys with guns and all, they're fighting with us. I took a broom handle, I'm whacking a guy, and next thing is, the only thing that saved me was a 911 call from a black woman that says, you better send help. There's a little bearded white cop going to get his ass kicked. And that recording was used as evidence on it. And then in Brooklyn with that creep Holtzman, that ugly bitch over there in the DA in Brooklyn, she tried to indict me on a guy that killed 2 people, shot him in the head, and then he put 3 detectives in the hospital. I used to carry a double-barrel shotgun, but I used it more as an instrument of beating a guy on the head.
Everybody did, because we were outgunned. But let me tell you, with that CCRB case, now I'm in taxi truck. I got a couple of fantastic arrests. You saw it in the book.
Yeah.
It's December. The list, I'm going to get promoted to sergeant. I'm so excited. I was number 69 on the list.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody's patting me on the back, right? Teletype comes up. My name's not on it. The captain says, I can't believe you. He calls downtown. He says, that captain says you have an active CCRB complaint.
So you got knocked off the list?
Knocked me off the list. Yeah, and now we just had our 3rd child. I could use the extra money, and here I was sick to my stomach with what they did to me, more because what they did to my family.
Yeah.
And now I got to go back to the precinct. That's the same year they had the police strike, January 15, 1971. So I'm driving a radio car. I'm on patrol. I'm a detective on patrol, because detectives didn't do in the strike. Fast forward, okay? Later on, I go before the trial commissioner.
Yeah.
And who's there but that captain, right? And he's looking for his pound of flesh. Well, I'm dying 1,000 deaths, because you know how this kangaroo court works, right? They're going to find me guilty. Who's there as my witness? The Bronx district attorney who handled the case. And he goes into the record. The trial judge yelled at the captain for what he did to me with my record, chastised him in front of everybody. Of course, I'm still didn't get promoted. I won't get promoted till July that year. But that's the kind of job it is.
Well, thank God you were there. And, a little reflection on that. When Tom Colleran, my partner, and I grabbed, we got one in Chicago. It's a great story. One in Chicago, one in New York. And then he ushered us out of the squad room, all the chief of detectives and all the pinky ring, diamond wearing guys. We went to the bar, the corner bar. And I'll never forget, Jimmy Sullivan was the chief, and I don't even know if he's still alive. He was so pissed off because we weren't under the detective division. We were under patrol anti-crime. And the next thing is, we got every award from the governor, the city council mayor. You know what our reward was, Vernon? They shipped me to one asshole end of Brooklyn. Little did they know, they shipped me to the killing field 7-5. And my partner was shipped to the 8-8, the other end of Brooklyn. This was our reward. So they had to promote me because of the bribery review. They tried to give me $10,000. The guy killed somebody, and he had heroin and all that. So I wore the wire. And the next thing is I had 3 bribery arrests. I said, finally, I don't want to make overtime, because back then the only way you made money was overtime, and when you were a detective you were limited. So
detectives weren't allowed to make overtime.
Right.
was a detective.
So then everybody's saying, Bo, you're such a hotshot. How come you're not a detective? So I had the bribery review board. I go before the bribery review board, and the next thing that happens is McGuire was the police commissioner, and they didn't.
Good man.
A great man. He goes like this. They were promoting 50 detectives. The next day, I threw my badge at a guy named Scott, black guy, Captain Scott, became a big chief, and I said, I'm resigning. I said, I made all these arrests. I made 1,400 felony arrests. I've been mugged 500 times as a decoy, 3 bribery arrests. Why can't I be a detective? These other guys are becoming detectives with 18 months on the job. Boom, he goes, put your badge away. Give me 1 day. The commissioner knows all about it. The next day, the teletype comes up. I was number 51. But here's what I did, Vernon. You'll love it. I went, and they're all seating there, all the chiefs. I shook the hand of Jimmy Sullivan, and I looked at him, and I says, you could put me anywhere you want. I'll be a detective. Little did they know, I became a homicide detective immediately. Herbie Holman says, you're on the homicide team. And the rest of that is a history of all the arrests I made. And then I go to Guido. Guido was his name, Guido. He was the chief of internal affairs. And I says, Chief, thank you very much. He goes, Deedle, I'll put handcuffs on you 1 day. I said, Chief, maybe you'll fire me for some bullshit, but you'll never put handcuffs. I don't steal. I've never been involved in corruption. And I walked off there, but the same type of thing that I read about you. But you know what? This was what the job was. You were fighting all different ends. And reading your book.
It's easy to fight the bad guys. You know which way they're coming from. It's the ones inside the building that are going to get you. Don't forget, I had that shootout down in Little Italy.
Yeah.
All right? $100,000 in diamonds, right? All kinds of stuff. I should have got the Medal of Valor.
Yeah.
No, they gave me a commendation because they thought I was a hot shot because I was a robbery detective. I had inside information. Are you crazy? I risked my life. I saved the guy, got the diamonds back. Well, guess what? The story in that funny case is that case got sold out in Manhattan court by a corrupt judge. Next thing you know, the Rackets Bureau's looking at me like I did something. I said, whoa, I didn't do anything. I said, me and the complainant have been waiting to go to court. They check, they find out the judge is a mob judge, and he dismissed the charges. They re-indicted. I got a nice letter from Hogan telling me what a great guy I am, but nothing. I got a commendation.
Yeah.
So that's the kind. But then 6 years later, I find out that the other guy in the car is John Gotti. I never knew that. He comes up on a wire. He said, this crazy maniac with his own car is chasing us through the streets shooting. That was me.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country. Anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. Goldbelly ships Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garden's famous cakes. So, if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT. That's goldbelly.com, promo code GIFT.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
I grew up with John Gotti, the father. And, I had to separate that. And I never worked. I saw you had a lot of involvement with organized crime guys on your narcotics investigations. But one of the things Vernon and I would not do is work in organized crime. I used to drive Ralph Scopo up to be Fat Tony Salerno up in just before I became a cop. So I knew everybody. I knew Johnny Gotti, the Scopo brothers. So I would be a hypocrite if I started working organized crime and then having dinner with my friends saying, turn around, I got to put handcuffs. I said, just put me in the scumbag neighborhoods where minority people, black, Hispanic, we went after the gangs, Savage Colts, the Seven and Mall. I used to fist fight with the president, but I loved being on the street, getting the street scumbags off the street, fighting with homicides on the street, robberies. That was my baby. I didn't have to go after organized crime. You had other guys that wanted to do it. Good luck. Sometimes like in the 7-5, I caught two dumps there, 2 dump homicides. Henry Hill gave them up, and then Jimmy Burke was the one that committed the homicides on this testimony of Henry Hill. And I had to go up to Allenwood and pick him up. And he goes, Bo, what the hell are you doing here? I said, this ain't me. This is your friend Henry Hill. I caught these 2 cases. So we're on the plane. We were drinking a little scotches on our way back from Allenwood. We were drunk by the time we arrived in LaGuardia. And then Herbie Holman says, you're drunk, Deedle. Your prisoner's drunk. He's got no handcuffs. I said, this is Jimmy Burke. He's got 7 murders on him. He ain't going nowhere. But these were things that you could do. Today, you talk about this, they go like this. Wah, wah, wah. And even, here's the thing I want to say in reading your book. It was excellent. Every story is excellent. But the most important thing is things have changed with the technology, with the advent of the DNA, and with the way that they use these computers now that we really didn't have back then.
No, we were operating in the blind.
Yeah.
But you know something? Every assignment I had built me towards this Godfather of Homicide, because we learned skills. We learned skills in narcotics. You can't be a homicide cop without spending time in narcotics, okay? Everybody's lying in narcotics. Try to find the truth. So each skill set, wiretaps, bugs, interviewing people. So by the time I come to homicide, I'm a boss. You think I'm stupid enough to tell people with 20 and 30 years on how to do their job? I know better. I don't know their job. I know narcotics. So I kept my mouth shut.
And listened. And you learned.
I started doing protocols until I was comfortable enough to make a decision. Then I check, is that a good decision? Yeah.
I love one thing about you too, Vernon, is like even coming upon a crime scene, how you identify on a crime scene and all that. And then the interrogation part. When you're talking to someone, the interrogations is an art. And I learned that right away when I first became a detective. It's an art of interrogation when you're asking questions when you know the friggin' answers and you can get somebody. I miss it the way it was, but today there could be no Bo Deedle on the police department, and you would have a hard time too because a lot of jealousy.
I wouldn't be a commander. But you see, I always protected my people. My job as a commanding officer was to surround myself with good people so they would protect my tail end. My job was stop the missiles from coming in from headquarters. And my early assignment in 7th Homicide, I prevented the murder of 2 narcotics cops. It was unbelievable. It was a hit, $15,000, right? The problem was when the informant gave the information, he also dropped the corruption allegation. Now, you and I both know the word corruption, bingo, the lights and bells go off. I had to tell the IAD captain, I says, I'm not giving you that information because I'm still conducting a criminal investigation. Okay. And there was a big to-do and everybody's yelling. So I yell loud at everybody else. I says, I'll be the whistleblower. If anything happens to those cops, I'll blow the whistle.
Yeah, but well, you want to know something. The poor officers today, if all they got to do is make an allegation, one, you use the N-word, the case will be thrown out automatically, and you're going to be prosecuted. Or my favorite headlock, which I used hundreds of times, nobody died. Now it's called a chokehold. Then you got a diaphragm law. You can't climb on top of the guy to handcuff him. How the hell you do it? What do you levitate from 6 foot up, drop the handcuffs? And then now, when you talk to a cop for directions, they got to stop everything and they got to fill out paperwork. This has become such a bullshit thing, and I really feel for these cops. But let's get into really this case really excited because I remember I had just retired. And then Nick Pileggi put me on the cover story of New York Magazine and all that bullshit that happened. And I remember...
Well, you deserved it. You had a good career.
Well, I was lucky. I was lucky that I met a guy like Nick Pileggi and was able to do that. And I'm I love the guy and all that. But one thing I remembered, a guy named Larry Davis, because I had a lot of friends. Johnny Hennessy was in the 4-4 squad. Did you ever work with John Hennessy? I think he was a first grader.
Yes. I was the commanding officer of Bronx Homicide, so we worked with all the detectives.
Well, he worked with me on the Palm. We had the task force for the Palm Sunday massacre, and then we had 200 detectives, and Johnny, the greatest detectives in the world. I can't repeat all their names, from Brooklyn, all over the city, were put together. This was the mass murder of 10, and I was one of the detectives, but I was named as one of the arresting officers, front page of the paper and the newspaper. I got all the accolades. I was no better than anybody else, but you know what I did? I worked hard, Vernon. I worked day and night. I would not sleep. I worked day and night, and part of the thing was you learned from these detectives that had so many years, and that you can't read about. You've got to learn when you're with a real seasoned. Now they lost them all. They were all retiring. How is a kid with 2 years on the job going to learn with another guy with 4 years on the job? How does that happen, Vernon?
What happens in this job is we get too smart for this job. And if you are a skilled investigator or a boss or anybody, and you're smarter than the person on top of you, you're a threat. And even though you don't say nothing, your nonverbal body language gives it up when they say, we have a great idea, let's do this. And you go, that's not going to work in the street, okay? And they get pissed off. So what happens is they force people like us to retire. And every time an experienced police officer walks out the door, out walks a walking, talking crime computer, and none of that information is in headquarters, okay? It's in his head.
But
it's a shame.
One thing, and again, I'm recommending your book here, The Godfather of Homicide. A lot of people want to, if you're a young detective or young cop, want to be detective, you give the basics there where you learn. Obviously, it's enhanced a lot more with the advent of the technical skills that are there we didn't have. But let's go to this scumbag. This guy, I wanted to come. I was retired, and I had a feeling of going up there to the Bronx to try to find this guy. Larry Davis. Let's talk that.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know he shot 6 cops. I think 4 of them were critical. He was like MFing anybody. Come get me, mother effer. He had the city paralyzed. You do the story because you worked on it and you were responsible for finding the son of a bitch.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. Once he was identified as a suspect in a quadruple homicide in Fort Apache in the 4-1 precinct, he should have been assigned to my fugitive unit. Our fugitive unit apprehended a hell of a lot more people than Larry Davis, okay, without incident. But the chief, who was an anti-detective, I call him Rotundo in the book, okay? Rotundo. We don't need
I'm sure I know who he is, but go ahead, keep going.
Well, we're not going to mention his name, but it's Rotundo. Anyway, because we didn't have it, they put together a quick attempt apprehension on November 19th on Fulton Avenue, and as a result, 6 cops got shot. Luckily, they didn't die. By the grace of God, there's a hospital across the street, Bronx, Lebanon, that if you brought your partner there, he'd kill you if he got out, okay? But they were transferred to Bellevue. They survived. I was at home when I got the call. When I got the call, I thought one of my guys, Tommy C., I thought he was dead. I raced in there, and I've handled police homicides before, Bo, so I know what I got to do.
He took a headshot? Did he get shot in the head? Did he get shot in the head?
In the neck. In the neck. So I put together an extraction team. You know what that is? A group. We're going to go place and pull these characters out of their nest. We knew where we had to go. In rolls Rotundo. No detectives in the street by orders of the police commissioner. We don't want a racial incident. I said, a racial incident? That's attempted murder, 6 cops. Where's the racial incident? I'm here to babysit you, Geberth. And he did. He sat there till 5:30. At 5:30, he took his fat ass home. At 5:35, me and 12 handpicked detectives were in the street. We missed him by an hour. The next day, all hell breaks loose. Alpha Bravo tours, 12 on, 12 off, and no detectives in the street. We want you to detect. Now, what the hell is that? So that means burning informants. Nobody could go unless a convoy went. The convoy consisted of emergency service, community representatives, plainclothes, uniform, and a big convoy of trucks and everything, et cetera. And it had to be led by a super chief, because we're the only department arrogant enough to have the rank of super chief. So the chief was called Patton. The next guy was Custer. The next guy was Nimitz. The next guy was Halsey.
And the majority of these super chiefs, well, I call them JOs, jerk-offs, that never made an arrest, have no clue about anything. They're political little ass suckers, and that's the problem. They can't tell you or me what's going on the street because they're up in the high caliber of the 1PP.
Well, that's why they call it the Tower of Babel. Anyway, the trucks couldn't move unless the super chief was in front. Now, this went on for 3 weeks. We were the laughing stock of the Eastern Seaboard. We can't find this mutt. I know where he is. He's in the Bronx or Harlem.
I remember New York was frozen. That was the top story every night. Where's Larry Davis? And people were afraid to walk around. And then when they catch this son of a bitch, everybody's yelling, Larry.
Before we catch him, every time they came into the neighborhood with the convoy, he went out the back door. At one point, I said to Rotundo, let me put my people on the perimeter. You're a fascist, Geberth. I said, I'm a fascist? No, I'm a realist. So you couldn't drive down these streets. And now you know, Bo.
No, you wanted to throw guys You wanted to throw guys in the backyard around the in circle where he couldn't escape.
No, but you couldn't drive down these streets in a Crown Vic without raising the neighborhood. They're coming in with a convoy. So on December 5th, 1986, I committed command-aside. One of my detectives had him on the wire. He's back at Webster Avenue. I said, do not notify command and control. You notified me. At that point, I was insubordinate. The deputy inspector who was there to watch me got up and says, I'm out of here. You know why? He said, if you want to commit suicide, I don't want to watch. I sent 38 black and Hispanics into that building, shut it down. They can't go out. They can't come in. And now we have it. In the meantime, I put them on notice to move the trucks.
Yeah.
And so they were 5 blocks away. Wow. It took them 15 minutes to get there because the super chief that day was Custer.
You had to wait for the super chief before you could go in. Go ahead.
Yeah. So now I'm in the building staff. He comes running in with his Beetle Bailey helmet going up and down, screaming, whose authority have you done this? As authority vested in common sense. By the way, chief, you look like a fucking asshole with that Beetle Bailey.
Said actually to the chief.
Yeah.
That was your
He turned around to see if anybody, and I ran in the building. I don't know where to go. Next thing I know, I'm in the basement and all the chiefs are there screaming at me. The housing lieutenant told me later, he says, Vernon, was the funniest thing. All the chiefs are screaming at you and you're smiling. Are you finished? Are you finished? Now, the chief, Patton, okay, we'll call him Jones in the book. He was a very sardonic individual. What he would do, he would call his chiefs and inspectors by the rank captain. Captain, I want to speak to you. These guys would die 1,000 deaths because that was their last civil service rank. So he says to me, Vernon, are you a lieutenant commander or a lieutenant? A lieutenant commander would know how to obey orders. I says, Chief, I'm whatever the fuck you want me to be. My people got them in the building. They're not your people. They're my people. Then your people got them in the building.
And we got to fast forward on it. So then the scumbag, you surround him, and then all of a sudden he surrenders, and he doesn't get shot. Wait, what happened to this Larry Davis? What was the end result?
Larry Davis, he wasn't convicted of any of the homicides. The Bronx jury acquitted him of everything.
He was a hero.
Homicides. 2 in Manhattan, yeah. But the worst part is when we took him out of the building, the police commissioner, Ben Ward, okay, the chief, and my detective, Andy Lugo, God bless his soul, walk him through a phalanx of police officers, and the people in the building are yelling, Larry.
Yeah, like he was a hero. So
yeah. Anyway, he got convicted of possession of the guns. That's the best they could do. While he was in prison, he got killed.
Oh, congratulations.
So the newspaper called me up and asked me what I thought. I said, well, it looks like the prison system did what the criminal justice we couldn't do. Justice has prevailed.
You know what, Vernon, we could sit here for weeks, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm telling everyone, The Godfather of Homicide is a must-read. There's more stories. Like I said, we could sit here for weeks. And then I guess after that happened, your retirement was inevitable at that point, right?
Well, you can't poke the beast in the eye. You know you got to go. Now, they're not going to come directly at me because they're like the mafia. You go out to have an espresso, there's only 2 beans instead of 3 in the anisette. Same thing in the police department. They're going to send an inspection team. By the time they finish, I'll be bleeding from 1,000 cuts. So I had to sneak out of the police department and have myself processed with the black civilian connections that I had, because I used to write them up for commendation when they did good work. They will process me out with just my tax registry number. On the day I had the papers were ready, that night before I couldn't sleep. I had a grandfather clock every hour, bang, bang, bang. I said, fucking, I'm up. I get dressed. I'm at headquarters at 7 o'clock in the morning. There's nobody there. They don't open till 8. I'll go get a cup of coffee. I go in, and from 45 minutes, I go from commander to civilian.
Yeah.
All right. I walk out of police headquarters, and for the first time, I noticed that I'm illegally parked. But I took the police plate before I went downtown.
Well, you know what, Vernon? My retirement was kind of similar. I had broke my leg parachuting with some towelhead Saudi Arabian princes. It's a whole long story. But make a long story short, I never wanted to retire. I had 30 line of duties, fractured skull, broken this, broken that, stabbed, all kinds of crap. But I never wanted to retire. They told me they were not going to put me on full duty. When I came back, they figured, now we don't have to put them back on. So you have to play the game if you get 3 quarters. You know, you got to do 6 months, you got to play the game. With the doctor, you know what I did? I threw my papers in. I lost millions of dollars in 3 quarters. I didn't care. And then Nick Pileggi put me as the feature story in New York Magazine, and the rest is history. You know, again, Vernon, you are a remarkable guy, and I'm very honored to know you. And I really want to thank you for coming on the show. This is a great podcast, and I'm going to tell you again, I keep repeating it, The Godfather of Homicide. Get this book, and there's so many cases. And
We Work for God. Remember that one. They're all over the country. We work for God.
And we work for God. Thank you, Vernon, and God bless you and your family. And thank you for coming on the show, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Nice seeing you again.
You
Take
too.
care.
Bye-bye.